All right, the next panel is all about Tortoise and the Hare. And yes, we were having conversations with our thought leaders, with people, and they said, because obviously this is where we're talking about speed. And they're like, hey, you know that the tortoise actually won. And we're like, yeah, we get it. You know, the tortoise beats the hare. Be steady. Don't rush. We've heard it all, and we've heard some amazing and scary things today. But do we have time to take it slow, to be steady? I think that there's a place where we can find compromise. We need to speed things up. We need to fail faster. Hell, we need to fail the fastest. Let's just quit. Let's figure that out. All right? And so we're going to do that, and we're going to figure out how we're going to make that move with the wonderful panel that we're bringing up today. So first, we have the amazing Ms. Renée Sattiewhite with AACUC, Tom Davis from Trellance, Jim Hayes from State Department FCU, Ed Chuang from Logix Federal Credit Union, and Brad Bendeck from Co-op Solutions. Let's go.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I am the luckiest woman today because look at my panel. Woohoo! The tortoise and the hare. They say that slow and steady wins the race. But is that true today? Innovation must be reimagined for a happily ever after. And I add, gentlemen, with a lens of inclusion, reaching the right demographics. So, what do you think? What does happily ever after look like to you? We'll start with Brad.
All right, well, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. So my name is Brad Bendeck. I'm Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships, Corporate Strategy, and Corporate Development at Co-op. I'm excited to be here on this panel today. Innovation in financial services has been kind of a passion of mine in the 15 years I've been in this space. I came from 10 years in telecommunications. And some of you remember Nextel, Push to Talk. I was with them for some time, and then eventually Sprint when the companies merged. And I was fascinated. This is back in 2008. I was fascinated by this confluence of two mega trends. You have this rapid adoption of mobile devices, smartphones, handheld computing, distributed computing, and the digitization of banking and commerce. And it was clear at the time that we were at the precipice of something that would really change the way that consumers behave and engage in financial services. It's captivated me ever since. So I've probably fashioned myself as a bit of a fintech geek before fintech was even a term. But fast forwarding to today, it's obviously a very different landscape than it was back in 2008. So, we've seen the number of fintechs out there it's astonishingly large, literally thousands in just the US alone. So much so that it's almost impossible to keep track of. But honestly, there's also not a better time for credit unions to jump in and partner. And this is one of the things that I spend a good chunk of my time on and my team's time on, and looking at how fintechs can be a key ally to credit unions and a distribution channel for helping them reach consumers in a cost-effective fashion. Credit unions have a great position of trust with members and can certainly influence behavior. But that position of trust is fragile, right? If credit unions don't innovate and stay in sync with members' changing demands, and they are certainly being shaped by new entrants. As a quick aside, because I think it's relevant, it is worth pointing out that many fintechs also depend on other fintechs. Their entire ecosystem, in some sense, kind of hangs on that codependency. So it behooves credit unions to think kind of the same way in how they approach partnership, and maybe don't feel necessarily the need to build or buy. And I'll be blunt in saying that there's not really many good excuses anymore not to attempt to innovate as a credit union. I understand that certain technical limitations may exist that make that challenging, whether it's digital banking platforms or core platforms. But inertia is not really an option, and there have never been more cost-effective tools at your disposal to help via targeted partnerships. So in terms of like the approach to innovation itself, we like to think about it in terms of a member persona strategy as the core, and that let that be the guide to your efforts. So understand the segments that you've got. So whether that's based on demographic, behavioral, or psychographic attributes, or some combination thereof. Segments you value most and the segments that you aspire to jump into, because otherwise it's like navigating without a compass. You don't know how to prioritize which partners to pursue. And Sam Paxton, our Chief Experience Officer, will address this in more detail in her comments on member centricity coming up. But hyper-personalization and one-to-one marketing may be kind of the nirvana state, if you will. But if you're not prepared to go that far, considering smaller evolutionary steps would be certainly the next best option. So identifying partners that maybe cross over several of your target segments and target personas, and experiment with some safe options to start, to set a foundation, and then get more specialized as you look to uniquely support each target member segment. Don't be afraid to take some educated risks, the Feel Fair Concepts Act that you mentioned, and don't feel like you have to be a trailblazer either. I mean, it's pretty proven that being a fast follower is a viable strategy in financial services. And then just to conclude here, one thing I want to end with is, we understand at Co-op that while we represent over roughly 3,000 credit unions as clients, and we try to equip credit unions with thought leadership on how to grow and thrive in today's increasingly dynamic market, we know we can't be everything to everybody. So we recognize that partnership's a key element of our business success as well, and our business strategy. And so one of the ways we've started to do this is through what we call our strategic provider program that was launched in February. The concept is pretty simple. We give our clients access to pre-vetted fintechs that have products and services that are currently not offered in-house by Co-op through a referral model, and all the pre-negotiated and preferential commercial terms that we've provided up front are available to our credit union clients. With the vendor landscape being so kind of vast and fragmented right now, and with some credit unions, having challenges with procurement and having the right labor specialization, we sought to mitigate some of those challenges by leveraging our internal talent, whether it be partner development, vendor risk management, cybersecurity, BCPDR. There are people that walk into work every day with expertise in this, and so we would leverage those people fully to make sure that we're identifying and vetting best-of-breed partners for our credit unions. And our recruitment strategy today has really been guided by some of those guiding principles that I mentioned before about building block solutions that address kind of a multiplicity of different credit union needs today. So at Co-op, we stand ready to support our credit unions in their innovation journey, which candidly we're navigating ourselves too as we look to support our clients with innovative solutions that address today's needs and demands.
Thank you, Brad. We don't want to navigate without our compass, so we're looking forward to hearing the rest of that.
Correct.
Ed, what do you say?
Hi, Renee.
Good to see you on this panel again.
Thank you. Same. Likewise. Hello, everybody. I'm going to shake things up a bit, and I'm going to say some provocative things at the risk of maybe angering some people. But I think maybe the question of the tortoise and the hare isn't the right fairy tale or question to ask as far as banking goes, because it's not entirely about speed. In my mind, I think both the tortoise and the hare will fail in today's environment. And I think if credit unions don't change the way we think and operate and structure ourselves, we're headed for a pretty grim future too. So one of the things I think we should talk about and think about is a notion that Ron Shevlin wrote about in the summer of this year. He said that the fintechs have already won the deposit war. I'm going to take that further and actually go ahead and say that in my mind, I think the fintechs and the big banks have also won the product mix war, the member relationship war, the household deepening war, and the marketing war, and on, right? And the gap is only widening. So what's the difference between what we do versus what some of those winners do? And I think it's because they're built to operate with agility. Whereas credit unions, I think we reward people that are good operators or good financial people, and we escalate them into leadership positions. But let me break that down even further. So the winners on the fintech side have three components that make them work very well. There's strategy, there's execution, but there's also innovation, right? So where's the innovation in the credit union space? I'll give you some examples using SoFi as really the baseline here. So under the CFO at SoFi is a position called a Chief Creative Officer, whose main job is to push the boundaries of traditional banking. I'm willing to bet none of our credit unions have a Chief Creative Officer under the CFO, right? Just like I'm willing to bet that we don't The majority of us don't have platform development teams, interdisciplinary product teams, right? We don't have R&D teams taking moonshots. And it's not a budget question, because I'd like you to ask any of these startups pre-seed round whether they were flush with cash. It's a mindset thing. Take, for example, also SoFi's board. 75% of SoFi's board is made up of venture capitalists and technologists. There are only 3 financial executives on SoFi's board. So if we really want to compete with the SoFis and Chimes of the world, and if we want to carry out all of our strategic conversation about being more like Amazon, we need more than our team of like 2 digital channels developers that were tellers a year ago, right? That's the equivalent of bringing a knife to a digital banking gunfight. So that's my opening statement.
All right. He shook it up a little bit. Tom?
Wow, I get to follow that. Well, first off, this is my second time at Underground, and like last time, I was on the panel right before me was the panel that I wish I was on, so I'll have to work with you a little bit. I'm a data tech geek. I've been that my whole career. And I could go way, way back and talk about database structures and things like that would bore everybody. But it's just something I've always just had an inkling for. I don't know why. And so I know the big bad wolf we were talking about, and then Kevin, you said something about cooperatives. And I do believe that the credit union value prop, and Jay, you were saying it as well, is really the collective power of all of your data. And being able to take that outside of the credit union, but in a place that the credit unions control wholly without the F words that we were talking about earlier today, and then turn it loose on some concepts that Ed hit on. Pull the people out of the credit union that know how to work with that data, and then let them work on that large data set. And so with that, go to cudx.com, because that actually exists today. All of your credit union data can be put in a place and be shared by credit union executives, people that you control and that you power the whole entire cooperative. So just give that a shout. That would have been what I would have said last time. But I did prepare for the tortoise and the hare, so I will give you my tortoise and the hare thing real quick. And just like the Underground, I'm supposed to pivot, right? So I did. So tortoise and the hare. I think it's important to understand why the psyche of why we do and do not adopt new technology. I'm 57 years old, so I was born in the 70s. The new technology that came out when I was a kid was not like today. I mean, if we got something new, like a microwave, I remember people on our block got a microwave. By the way, first time I used a microwave, I was in my 20s. So just think about that. So there wasn't as much, we just weren't bombarded with the ability to adopt new technology. So we didn't know. We didn't build it into our caveman evolution kind of way of going about doing things, these 57-year-old Midwestern people like myself, which predominantly there's a lot of people at credit unions that not only use the services of credit unions that are in my age bracket, but also have leadership positions that Ed was talking about. And many of them do not have the propensity to want to adopt technology like I do. I just happen to be, if you've ever seen the bell curve, there's, the left side of the bell curve, about 5% are what they would call, innovators. Then you've got about 10% that are early adopters. And you got the middle, which is, a fast follower, not so fast follower. And then on the end, you've got the laggards. And I didn't make this bell curve up. This is just some researchers that have done this to try to understand why we do or do not adopt technology. So I'm way on the left. For somebody that's 57 years old, it's probably a little bit unique. I love playing around with technology. So the early adopters at your credit unions or the people in your lives are the ones that play with it and get no benefit. They just get joy of playing with technology. That's way, way to the left, right? And then you've got the next folks that are like, hey, check out what I found out on my iPhone or my Android or my new truck or whatever. And then you sort of move through there. And I would say that we need to understand diversity when we work with technology in order to be able to move at the right pace and make sure that you have somebody from each one of those groups when we're talking about new technology and how we're going to use it in the credit union. And I will say this, the technology is being used. The decisions you're making are you going to embrace it or is it going to be there before you're ready for it? And I'm going to give you a good example. In 2014-15, chip card technology came out. And that's the little chip that we now see on almost every single credit and debit card. At that time, I worked for a company called CSU. Actually, it's the same company I work for now. I've worked at Trellance for almost 20 years. I've been in the credit union space for that long. And most of the credit unions were like, I'm not going to adopt that technology. Like, I don't know what that means. It's expensive. Some people up here, we're talking, Denise, you were talking about small credit unions. They could not afford to put that chip. It's not even about the card. It was about being able to enable the rail on their payments platforms to be able to put the chip on the card so it would actually work when it got in the terminal. And so there were people that were like, I'm not going to adopt that technology. Do you know what that would have cost the credit union industry if they did not adopt that technology? And we're not talking about just small credit unions. Some medium to large size credit unions were wondering whether the cost of fraud would outweigh the adoption of that technology. I'm not kidding you. So what does that look like? A bunch of CFOs in the room that probably did not understand payment rails, did not understand the technologies. And I know you understand this because you probably lived through it at the same time. And the CUSOs had to come up and say, whoa, we can't do this. And CSU, and I know Co-op probably did similar things at the time. We had to pay for them to force them to adopt the technology to keep them safe because they didn't want to absorb that themselves. And it was the incorrect mindset there that was really the problem. That technology was going to come out. The banks were going to get it, and guess where all the fraudsters were going to go? They were going to go on the credit unions that didn't have those chip cards. That was 9 years ago. That was the way that we looked at adopting technology in the credit union industry, and it's got to change. I don't know if it necessarily has to change overnight. I agree with some of the drastic concepts that you brought forward. But in my mind, when I look at it, I think it's diversity of thought around the technology. Some technologies we have to adopt. Some technologies we can be a little bit more patient with. And no technologies are all the same. So each time we go through this, unfortunately, we're going to have to go through this again and again and again. And it's just going to become part of our life, and we'll get used to it, like my son, who deals with new technology at a rapid pace. And we'll get there as an industry as well. So anyway.
Thank you, Tom. Very good. Appreciate that. Now, Jim, I know that you're a big thinker, so I want to know, what's our happily ever after?
Well, thanks. So, love everything that you guys said. And actually, what a day it's been, because all the prepared statements that I was thinking about as I was sort of going to go through, when I was flying out here yesterday, have all starting with Ron asking if we're going to be making auto loans 5 years from now. The world is changing, right? So if you think about the pace of change from, over your 20 years, right? We had like 100 years of no change whatsoever in financial services. I mean, adding machines and things like that. The pace of change today is so drastic. And of course, 4 years ago, I think it was probably a little before the pandemic, the credit union space was sitting here saying, how are we going to fight the fintechs? How are we going to compete against the fintechs? And here we are now saying, how can we adopt them faster, right? And the world has changed fast over 4 years, and it's going to continue to change. I mean, the whole AI thing is just going to make it go faster and faster and faster. So, number one, I think the Hare wins. Slow and steady is not going to cut it. I think we're going to have to be fast adopters. We're going to have to jump on the change, because the big banks, as Ed, they're moving ahead and they're blowing us away. I mean, if you've looked at the American Consumer Satisfaction Index, banks have been ranking higher than credit unions over the last few years, and that gap is getting wider and wider. People expect to be able to self-serve. They expect to have an integrated financial experience. They're working with Venmo, and they're working with Apple Cards, and they're working with Chimes, and it's all integrated, super, right? Those kids up here, those UNLV kids said, it's got to be easy. And we as an industry are clunky. We're clunky. We don't integrate well. All of our systems are integrated or are installed in silos, and they don't talk to each other. And it's really clunky to work with most credit unions. I'm a member of at least 5 or probably 7 credit unions now. And, and my own included, they're clunky. It's a clunky experience. And we are not going to win these college students over with the clunky experiences that we're offering our members. And forget about that. I have a 13-year-old son who's never going to work with a credit union like ours if we don't improve the experience overall. And so I think that's got to be really fast and furious. So let's talk about how do we get there? Because all the small credit union talk, everything was really good. There's a couple things, and so I'm on my 3rd credit union being a CEO of, so I'm going to say I'm starting to see trends. There's a couple things. One, from our vendor standpoint, and there's a lot of you in the room, you got to do what you do well. Don't come with mediocre sort of solutions. And if you're mediocre in the primary solution you do, don't start expanding into other services. You know what? Do what you do really well. And I would urge you, and I don't sit on a lot of boards for vendors, but for God's sake, stop trying to become all things to all people. Do what you do well, and just do it. I mean, that is going to save so much heartache and grief. When it comes to implementing the software, don't let my staff tell you how to implement your software. Going back to the first time my credit union did a core conversion, I guess 11 years ago, and I didn't realize, I didn't connect the dots at the time, and so the core, I won't name them, gave us all the surveys and said, "Here, have all your staff fill out these surveys." And so we did that. We implemented, went through a great core conversion, everything went well. 6 months later, we're like, man, we haven't really experienced any of the efficiencies that we thought we were. And then we kind of started to connect the dots. It's like, well, that's because the core implemented it, the vendor implemented it the way we told them we do our processes. So instead of adopting the good and efficient processes that the software provided, the vendor came and said, oh, we can implement this the way you do it today. Well, don't do that anymore. Don't let us do that. Don't let us make the mistake, because we are our own worst enemies. We don't like change. Our staff who have been around for 20 years know one way to do something. When your software comes to the table with a fresh way of doing it, force us to go to that process. Tell us we need to get into more process re-engineering, because otherwise we're taking, this is the adage that I used to use, taking a Cadillac piece of software and turning it into a Pinto, right? I mean, you've got to, but we're our own worst enemy because we're so fearful of change, and our staff tend to be that way. And so if you come to the table and say, well, you can keep all your same processes and we'll just, adopt to it, that doesn't do us any good. The last thing I'll say for that, for all the vendors in the room, you guys work together. You guys create partnerships. In some ways, especially the smaller the credit union you are, you don't have the leverage. It's a big piece of puzzle, right? It's a big puzzle with a bunch of pieces, and you're like, do I have Fiserv? Do I have Meridian Link? Do I do Co-op? Do I do PSU? Right? You have all these different choices. To be honest, if you guys would all get together and come up with a really nice, even solution that was integrated, you get a bunch of credit unions that'll come do business with you, because that is, you know better than what we do probably in most of the cases of how you can integrate with other partners, with other vendors, and you can come to the table and come into my office and say, I'm not just going to solve this problem, but we together are going to solve all these problems, and you will really help us out that way. Anyway, I think that's it.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Ed, I'm going to put you on the spot for our last question. We have about 3 minutes to get this done. What would you do if money and time were an issue to make us happily ever after?
So I think what's different about today's technology environment versus where we were even 3 or 5 years ago is that we don't have to make trade-offs per se. There are so many technologies such as headless cores today, or the ability to stand up sister organizations where we can maybe think about how to do things properly as a parallel initiative instead of solving the problem of figuring out our decades of legacy issues. And so that's one potential answer is, don't start by thinking, how do we get to where SoFi is using what we have? Let's start with a blank whiteboard.
Great, thank you, Ed. Guys, each one word to move us forward to happily ever after. Brad?
Agility. I agree with what you said. Agility, yeah.
Ed?
Agility.
Tom?
I'm not going to say agility. I'll go last.
Well, I'm gonna say something that I wanted to say before and I didn't, and because the question of the previous was, how do we fail fast, right? That was a question, is how do we get to the point where we can fail fast and go quick? One of the things that I think that we probably ought to do as credit unions is we need to involve our boards more, right? One of the reasons that CEOs don't want to take a risk of failure is they think they're going to get fired. I mean, let's face it, right? If boards are so disconnected that they see a high risk being taken, if there were more board members in this discussion today, it would really help out, because then you're going to start bringing your board along with you to take that risk with you. And there's less of a fear of losing your job or losing your bonus, whatever it is, whatever the thing is that you're afraid of losing. But when we don't, and I do know a lot of CEOs that like to separate their boards and not bring them along. I personally like to bring my boards along when I can, because as much as they know, if they know what I know, they can have the similar mindset. That will help us fail forward, or fail fast and fail forward, because it won't be so scary to fail. And a credit union might be willing to take a little bit more risk if we know our boards are with us in taking that risk. And there's that transparency. That's something that would help out.
Okay, great, thank you. So, Zach, I'm going to steal something for just a second. So, everybody, please stand up. So, Zach came up, Sue introduced Zach, and he got this great welcoming applause. Sue Mitchell is extraordinary, and I just want to say, happy, happy birthday to you. Can we give her a round of applause? Woohoo! And that's a wrap.
All right, panel, sit back down, because I know we've got a couple questions coming from Sue
Well,
to
she
start.
threw me off.
I know she
completely.
did. I promise you that was not on me. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to say a couple things. First was, Tom, we intentionally didn't put you on data, so we'll talk later. But primarily because I knew that you would talk about moving faster. And data gives us the power to move faster. And so when I think about kind of the traditional functions, and we talk about Tortoise and the Hare, we have to fail faster, and we have to have our boards there. And so some of the kind of controversial comments you all made, I think that we can't be afraid to have our boards hear that, okay? And so I just wanted to throw that to Tom and just tell you. You can reach out to me. But
Yeah, no, that's quite all right. First off, if you don't know me, and I'm not a very well-known person in the credit union space, when you grow up in tech and the way that I did, nobody wants to talk with you. They just, you're the guy in the break room over there eating your peanut butter and jelly sandwich with your crust cut off, and you're like, that's me. And so I've been there forever, and, we were a payments company, and we were, the payments industry is, as Brad could say, it's a very difficult industry. CSU decided to move on from that, rebrand themselves as Trellance, and they looked at that PBJ guy in the back and said, why don't you just be the CEO? The transition from being the guy who knew how to solve problems, I could spin up an Exchange server. I set it up at home. I have no idea why. I just thought it'd be sort of cool. I was just that guy. And so I failed all the time. I have that Visa kind of mentality, or these other fintech company kind of mentalities, where the failure was a free lesson. And it taught me how to move forward. And so I got frustrated with failure. I do not like failure. No one does. But I always told myself in the very beginning, today is a day you're going to learn. You're not going to like it. Tomorrow, you're going to be smarter, and you're going to like it. And so that's how I got through those failures. And boy, did I make some stupid ones. You want to hear one that's sort of funny? Back when Alexa came out, man, I wanted to program Alexas to do everything. And so my son and I got together, and we made a magic mirror. I don't know if you've ever seen these things. But you buy a mirror, you put a screen in it, and you get a Raspberry Pi, and you hook it up to the Alexa servers, and you can talk to the mirror, and the mirror will bring up your calendar, or it would do all this other stuff. So I built this mirror, and I'm so happy, and I've got Alexa and all my smart home stuff, and I'm so proud. My wife could give a crap. So I'm like, come on, honey, you got to check this thing out. And I'm like, watch this, unlock doors, turn off lights, da-da-da-da-da. And so she goes outside of the house, and she screams through the window, unlock doors, and the doors unlocked. And she looked at me and said, fail fast, right? So, yeah, I was so proud. My son was so proud. We're like, we could fix that, But it was the love of the adoption of the technology that puts me way on the left. And I have to be with people like my wife and other people. That's what I was trying to talk about. I can't be the one that drags us all forward. I will make mistakes. I will bring you some really, really cool tech. But there's got to be somebody there from the risk and compliance area. The lady that was up here earlier, I forgot her name. Yeah, I've got to be balanced with her. And I got to listen. And I've got to say, hey, you know what? As cool as I am, it might hurt my feelings, but at the end of the day, she's got a point. And so I'm going to use the word diversity. That's going to be the word. Agile is important. Diversity all the way through, that's probably more important. There you go.
Love it.
All right, we do have time for some questions. Oh, goodness. All right, let's go.
Hi, my name is Megan Piper. I'm the VP of Marketing at Westar Credit Union here in Las Vegas. I'm going to say something a little controversial and might actually make people a little mad. I feel like every time I come to the Underground or any conference or anything like that, we have this great discussion about how we have to move faster, we have to do this, and yet nothing happens. And we have the same discussion at the next conference and the next thing. And honestly, the credit union industry kind of feels like the DMV to me. And this is coming from someone who absolutely loves credit unions. I've been in the industry for 10 years. I think it's great. So you guys talked a lot about, technology and utilizing, QSOs and things like that. But what are you doing at your companies or at your credit unions that are cultivating or building that culture of change internally?
I'm sorry to take all the answers, but can I answer that one? Because this is a great example of exactly what happened at the Underground in GAC. And so I'm gonna give you guys a shout out because this caused me to start thinking. I'm the CEO of Trellance. Trellance has a lot of capital, as you all know, and so I'm a technologist. So I took that payments company, and in my mind, my vision was to turn it into a tech company, and I did. Through acquisitions and through build and hiring, most important, very, very smart people that understood the meaning of what credit unions are all about. Then we go to the Underground, and people are talking about sharing data everywhere, sharing data. And I went back to my team, Doug Vanderpool sitting back there, he's my chief technology officer, and I said, we can sell products and services all day long. That's what we should do, Jim. We should stick to that. We build data warehouses, we build predictive models, we have a whole entire team in India. We do this. We should not run around and try to capture the sharing data market. What we should do is put the capital out there and give it back to the credit unions and let them figure out how they want to share data. That idea came out at GAC. By the way, I came up here with ChatGPT, if you remember. I did my whole speech on ChatGPT that time. I didn't do it this time. I probably should have. I would have been more on point. But so I went to Filene. And then I went to CUNA, and then I went and started to talk to credit union CEOs, some big, some small. And I said, I want to give you this idea, but I don't want it to die. But I don't want it to be mine, because as Jim said, I've got a job to do. My job is to do what I'm doing today. I've already built that. My plate's full. And so that's where CUDX came out of. CUDX came out of GAC, Underground, concept. I started immediately going to Filene and Madison. Woku is up there with us. Immediately went to Mark Meyer. Immediately started pumping money in. Went to my board and said, you've got to give me the cash. You've got to give me the people. And you've got to give this away back to the credit unions that came out of the Underground. CUDX is only 6 months old. 6 months old.
Underground. My first Underground, I had all the black people stand up. There was only 6. 3 Undergrounds later, I had all the white people stand up. It was a whole room full of everybody. Underground changes lives. It may not look like it sometimes, but it really does. Really does.
That's amazing.
Just one comment here. The thing is this, for all of us to remember that those of us sitting in here are also being recorded. And we send this out, and we are excited to say, what's our open rate on this, Zach?
Yeah, we get to touch about 20,000 credit union professionals, and about 36% of them are listening and hearing what we're doing. So you've got people who are wanting to hear what you are saying. So
Yeah, and Roxy wants to make a point real quick.
And Zach, how many of them are board members that attend?
Oh, goodness. Now you're asking me to dig into my data.
Okay, well, the point being is that there's so much to learn here. And if the board members would participate with their CEOs, then you're hearing the same things. You're understanding the same things. You're getting the same information. And I know for some of the board members that in our credit union, we quit going to conferences where we hear the same thing all the time by the same people. We would prefer to spend our travel money here and get all of this and listen to the diversity of thought, of people, of practices. this is not a commercial. The whole bottom line was board members need to attend, and it would be awesome to have our CEOs with us.
I love
Wait,
that.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Can you say your name again?
Megan Piper with Westar.
I would like to invite you to come sit on a council on how to share data with credit unions and how to make a difference with members. It's going to be in Tampa, and I will get your card, and I will invite you. What I'm going to say is this. It's easy to sit in the audience and say, why aren't you doing something? We're a collaborative, collective community. Why aren't we all doing something? So come to Tampa and tell me what to do. I've got 300 people, and we've got hundreds of millions of dollars, and we'll get it done. Just tell us what to do. Let's work together, okay?
Sue?
I was just going to say that, when Roxy was talking about the boards, it was great. We don't advocate you don't go to other conferences, okay? Thank you, Roxy. But that's why we collide with conferences.
Yeah.
And I just want to say that when you talk about boards attending, CEOs, we want you to encourage them to come as well. I think that's part of that, Jim, of getting the message. Not everybody hears it. They're not aware of it. And I believe there are a few of the people that we have here, in particular, our group here that has courage to take on some of these things. And that's not always easy. So I just wanted to say that shout out to everybody. We need to have people having authentic conversations so that we can look at this stuff and look at our budgets. And so, Jim, thank you for bringing it.
And Susan, I think the next underground, you guys are GAC, and then you guys are going to do one at
March 3rd.
Yep, and then there's another one in Nashville. The
Yes.
conference is called EDGE. It's all about how credit unions live on the edge. It's not a vendor conference. It's something like this. It's going to start with the underground, and then we're going to move into sessions where we're going to talk about how do we live on the edge, or how do we not live on the edge, and what's the cost of living on the edge, and what's the cost of ignoring the edge. So it's a lot about what this panel is about, so I guess I was on the right panel. So I'm sorry for dominating. My bad.
No, we appreciate it. Well, everybody, please, big round of applause for our panel. Thank you so much. And you're right. Great question, Megan, to get that started. Tom, don't ever hide anything from us again so that we can share that information. And it's true, when we talk about ideas into action, it's not easy. Like Tom said, you can't let things die. And it takes time. This generative AI working group that we have, every one of us is busy. And to take time to volunteer and be there. And I mean, we gave them homework. We made them write. Maybe some of them use ChatGPT to help a little bit, but at the same time, they put in the time and the effort to make something happen. So what a surprise. We had no idea that was going to happen. And this is the power of the underground. This is what we do.